Good morning, everybody. It's Robert Phoenix, and I'm back once again to bring you your morning cup of reality. This is 15 Minutes of Flame, and we do this Tuesday through Thursday, um, right around this time, maybe maybe a little bit before this time, right around 8:45, 8:45, 9ish, right around there. A lot of it depends on what I'm putting together, what I put together today, trying to put a lot of pieces together for today's show. And of course, going to be focusing on the latest updates around Corona and some things that I've been uh, sort of uncovering in the Corona world. By the way, if you're in Chatlandia today, wish Joan a happy birthday. It's her birthday today. So give her a little high five in there. Happy birthday, Joan. And let's see who shows up in Chatlandia as we speak. There's Michael, and there's Steve, and the aforementioned Joan, and Judy, and Maury. Hey, Kevin, what's happening? Kevin, I reached out to your significant other, your SO, left a message. Have her call me. There's Tamara. Hi, Tamara. I got to get back to you, too. We'll do that today. And Finette Gatewood. Hello, Finette. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Chatlandia. And let's see who else we have there. There's Uncle Glenn playing third base. Uncle Glenn's on the hot corner every morning. Let's see who else do we have. There's Megan. Hi, Megan. Ian Barber. What's going on, Ian? Paula. Hi, Paula. Let's see. We got who else? Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? Michael. Did I say hi to Michael? Good morning, Michael. Good morning. There's Marie. Hi, Marie. Nice to see you. There's Isla. All right. We're showing up. We're showing up. The forces are gathering. Yes, they are. So I'm going to get into some Corona stuff today, and a few other things as well, just to keep you abreast of what's happening out there. Jasper is hanging out in his cat bed this morning. He's just sitting right across the way from me, and he's just chilling. He might decide to get up and come over, but he's enjoying a nice, well-deserved rest. And he was able to hold his food down yesterday after the show. I have a really funny story to tell you guys about Jasper. So I was having a conversation with a client who listens to the show, watches the show. And, we were setting up a session, future day to work together. She got a reading. Very interesting person, by the way. Super interesting. And she tells me that she's got a 4-year-old son. And her son, 4-year-old son, watches the show with her, and that he's infatuated with Jasper. He basically watches the show for Jasper. And he says to his mother, Mommy, when are we going to get a Jasper? Not even a cat. When are we going to get a Jasper? So Jasper has become a brand. Jasper has become a brand. He has superseded me. Jasper is a master at viral internet marketing. And he doesn't even do a goddamn thing except rub against his computer and show up from time to time on the show. I've got a lot to learn from Jasper, apparently. Just a funny little story, little anecdote. So we're in the post Biden Super Tuesday moment, which is very surreal in a lot of ways, extremely surreal. I have to say, there's such a level of cognitive dissonance with the whole process around Biden and what I would call the democratic, liberal, progressive mindset, which to me, I'm an outsider. I've always been an outsider all my life. I've lived my life from the outside in, not from that place, right? From the outside in, trying to live my experience from the inside out. Um, so I don't always understand how these mindsets work. They boggle my mind, just completely boggle my mind. And the whole thing that I'm referring to is groupthink. I don't understand groupthink. I've never understood groupthink. I've enjoyed playing on teams, um, but that's different. It's a different kind of group. But I've just never understood groupthink at all. And when I see what's happening around Joe Biden, it reinforces this idea in my head that there are certain people who are genetically or predisposed towards a certain type of groupthink or certain type of consciousness, and that they just fall in line. They just fall in line, and that they gravitate towards groups that promote that kind of mindset. Right? You would think that maybe it is the group that creates the mindset, but I don't think so. I think certain people have the mindset and then they gravitate towards the group so that they can be a part of this reality that they are trying to kludge and assemble and participate in with other people, which is, I think, very reassuring for a lot of people. So it's almost like the left or the Democratic, and the Republicans have their own kind of version of this, but it's different. And one of the things that Tucker Carlson, who I really like, again, let me just state unequivocally, I really like Tucker Carlson. I didn't always like Tucker Carlson. I thought he was a smarmy little prick many years ago, and he was, and I bet you he would attest to that. Oh, the Kraken is stirring. The Kraken is stirring. He's heard the call. Yes. As soon as I started to talk about groupthink and mindset, let's go. Come on. Your public awaits you. Your adoring public awaits you. Come on. Make your entrance. Come on. Here he is. Shall we turn on Jasper Cam? There's Jasper Cam. Yeah. Jasper, look into the I have to go all the way to the back now to give you. There he is. There's that face of wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States. Look at that. Isn't he a noble? That, Jasper is a Pygmalion story, rags to riches. Abandoned street cat, San Francisco. See, something good came out of San Francisco. It was Jasper. Rescued from the animal control. He was a scaredy cat. When he was a little kitty, scaredy cat. He used to hide behind things. Now look at him. No scaredy in him. So what was I talking about? I was talking about Tucker Carlson. So he was talking about how the Republicans, again, this is theoretical, but I tend to agree with the basic premise and format. Not that I am really down with the Republicans, but it's a mindset, and it's a mindset that's based on ideas, right? We're going to have ideas. These are the ideas that we're going to move forward, and we're going to theoretically limit the government's ability to intervene and get in the middle of our ideas, right? Which are going to be either economic or whatever. The left or the Democratic side, they have no ideas. They have no ideas. They have causes that they rally around. And that was the distinction that I thought was really interesting. So they have a cause that they rally around. It's global warming, which is I still think is a bunch of bullshit. There are a lot of other factors going on besides the factor that they want to sell people around global warming or climate change. Remember, it went from global warming to climate change when everything started to get cold. It's like, oh, okay, well, we got to abandon the global warming thing. Let's go climate change. And that way we can, we can protect ourselves against any kind of future change in the weather. So we have the climate change, and we have the New Green Deal, which are they're more like causes. They're not really ideas. And then of course there's the everybody gets free stuff, which is a cause. It's not really an idea. That there should be no borders, and that the haves need to divest themselves of what they have for the have-nots, and we're seeing how well that's going in California. So I thought that was a really interesting distinction that Tucker brought up. One group theoretically is involved in ideas, and the other group theoretically is involved in causes. So that when I see people begin to gravitate and how do I say that, assemble around a particular group-oriented mindset, it gives me some insight into why they're doing it. And it's not just the mindset, but and I used to see this. I used to be on this message board, and it was a basketball message board. It was mostly populated by upper middle class, super intellectual, progressives, and mostly Jewish. I would say 80% of the guys on that forum were Jewish. And they were all dyed-in-the-wool Democrats and progressives. And the ones that weren't so-called Jewish were kind of in the same mindset. They were very, very much in this, and I could never. I had to leave the group because I was appalled by their groupthink. I was appalled. They couldn't think through anything. This is going all the way back to 2008 when I was dosing on Ron Paul, and would bring up Ron Paul inside of the political discussion. And God, it was so funny. I was like that seems like such a long time ago. I was interviewing the director of what was it, the Bad Lieutenant, Abel Ferrara. I interviewed Abel Ferrara. I think I actually have it up on my website still. I interviewed Abel Ferrara. His girlfriend was there, and he just done a movie about the end of the world with Willem Dafoe, and it's all about the sun and the sun burning out. And it's Willem Dafoe, who's this artist, and he's really grappling with his existence and, being creative and trying to get in touch and have some kind of meaningful connection with this woman that he loves. And now that I look back on it, it was really a parallel for what was going on in Abel Ferrara's life. And in fact, his girlfriend, who was there at the interview, plays Willem Dafoe's girlfriend in the movie. And it's like the world wasn't ending. Like the sun going out and the world ending was more about his life. And him coming to terms with that, even though we didn't really talk about that. I should have talked about that. He seemed like a decent enough guy, very pro-Obama, and I we managed at the end of the interview to talk about politics a little bit, and he was pro-Obama, and I wasn't, and he said, well, who are you going to vote for? Mittens, like Mitt Romney, right? Was it, who was it? McCain. It was McCain. Who are you going to vote for? McCain? And I said, no, I wouldn't vote for McCain. I said, I'd vote for Ron Paul. And he scratched his head. He was like, who? What's he about? and it shocked me, right? It kind of shocked me that here's somebody that is involved in art and cinema and the theater of ideas, and he didn't really know who Ron Paul was or what he was about. And it was like there was just one or two choices, And so what happens is that they don't like the ideas of one group, so they constellate to the causes of the other. And that's what happened on this message board. I couldn't, they would just fall in line, whoever the candidate was. They didn't care. They didn't care who the candidate was because they were involved in sort of this causal connection of and again, ideas are different than ideology. Like an idea is something specific. An ideology is something that's broad, very broad. and far-reaching, or well, not even far-reaching, just broad. It's a big container versus an idea which is like a specific packet. Like you could have ideas within ideologies, but so they were again kind of being held hostage by their ideology and their party preference because in their minds that anything Republican or anything independent would be contrary to their ideology and thus defeat the ideology, not really the person, not really the ideas, not even really the causes, but the ideology itself. And so they would fall behind and fall in line, just like what we're seeing now with Biden. Like he is probably the worst presidential candidate I've ever laid eyes on in my almost 60 years on this planet. He's the worst. I've never seen anything like this before. He's a complete and utter travesty. And people turn a blind eye. They just turn a blind eye. Even people that like Bernie. Now I'm starting to see the shift now. And I thought perhaps that there would be a lot of Bernie outrage in Milwaukee. Nah, I'm starting to pull back on that. I'm seeing Bernie do his little dance now. Oh, I've known Joe Biden for years. He's a good man. He's a really good man. You know, it's like, oh God, please. Just please. Now you can see Bernie doing his little backtrack, his little shuffle. Let me tell you right now, if you're a Bernie Sanders person, you like Bernie Sanders, you support his ideas, you deserve better. You deserve way better than that lily-livered, spineless, noodle, communist talking head. You deserve better. You deserve somebody that's got a pair of cojones and a real heart versus some ideologue who folds like a cheap tent whenever things in his party don't go his way. I'm sorry, but it's true. He let you down last time, and he's going to let you down this time again. He'll just bend over because that's what he does. It would be I'd be very surprised and shocked if that guy had as much rancor and as much passion and as much rage against the so-called machine that he is supposedly rallying people against versus his own party or towards his own party, who has no problem punching him around, whipping him around, and marginalizing him. They have no problem doing that at all. But he can't seem to channel that kind of energy and angst in the other direction. Why? Because he is a captive and a prisoner of the ideology. That's what's going on with him. He is incapable of that. And so I watch these threads and these message boards. Well, you know, Biden's not my guy. He's not my first choice. I really want a Kamala. I really want a Mayor Pete. Oh, I really, really, really thought Bernie. But hey, he's going to be our candidate. So we got to get in line. You know, oh, anybody but the other guy, even this drooling, lecherous, borderline senile guy who cannot tell the difference between his sister and his wife. This is the man that they're going to get behind. This is why we're really in trouble as a species. I have to say, I'm being a little harsh. This is why we're in trouble as a species, because people are so deep into their denial and so inculcated into this ideology, which, by the way, they're just searching for and looking for and hoping to bump into so that the world can make sense for them and that they can wrap their head around a cause and something in the future that somehow feels good and says, well, we're doing our part. We're doing our part to keep humanity alive and da, 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 da. And, you know, that's all well and good and everything, but it's a bunch of bullshit. It's a bunch of bullshit. Sorry. You know, what's important is the here and now. What's important is what you are doing in order to make your life better. And it may sound incredibly selfish, but that's the truth. It is the absolute truth. At least to me it is. It may not be for you, but it is to me because I can see what goes on out there. And if you can make your life better, you have an opportunity to make other people's lives better. It doesn't work from the outside in. Not that way. It works from the inside out. Now we have a culture disruption called coronavirus, which I'm going to talk about briefly, or I will talk about in a minute or two. I just need to finish this thing up. But I believe that there are people who are more genetically predisposed to looking for groups and looking for kind of these clouds of ideology that they can move into so that they can feel safe. They can feel like life makes sense. They can have other people that they can talk with and commiserate with and look at the so called oppressors or the evils of the other and rally around that and point their fingers at them and sort of, how do I say this, support their own version of psychic immunity in their tribe or in their group or in their collective. I never understood it. I had to leave that group, that forum, but I kind of burned it down before I did. I kind of burned it down. I kind of left them with some, like I couldn't help myself. It was back when I was feeling a little more vindictive in my life, but it was when Trump got elected, and I just said to those guys, I said, I can't wait for you guys to have to wake up every single day and realize that this dude is your president. This is the best thing that you all deserve. Not because I was being cruel or mean, but because it couldn't entertain any other ideas. Could not entertain any other. And it was very interesting because there were two guys in that group. Like one of the first times I heard of Saul Alinsky was in that group. And one of the guys that was in that group was an interesting character. He was a lawyer. I used to hang out with him actually a little bit. He loved music, very soulful guy, but he talked about Saul Alinsky for the first time. This is going way back. So this would be like I don't know, around maybe 2000. So about 20 years ago, and this is when I started to kind of, go in. It was a few years later that I went to the Alinsky dive. I think it was about 2000, maybe 2003, actually. And he said, "Oh yeah, it's Saul Alinsky was the master of building things from the ground up, and he was an Alinsky acolyte and a community organizer, which was interesting." And then there was this other guy, really, really nice guy, like one of the nicest people I'd ever met in my life. And he was a Texan, very sensitive guy, older gentleman, very smart, really, really smart. And he had left Texas because Texas was, too redneck and too racist and all those other things. And he eventually migrated to California. I really liked him. I really liked this guy. And he had been influenced by a union leader by the name of Eric Hoffer, and again, a socialist. And he really helped kind of cast his mindset. And I had to burn bridges there. And I hated to burn a bridge with that guy because he was such a nice guy. But again, there was no, I was in more of a vindictive space back then. So I just, I burned down the house and I never went back to that group. I'm sure they don't miss me. And there were some good guys in that group. There really were. But they were all a little too touchy feel. Although I will say this, there was one guy in that group, and you could go back and watch a show that I did long time ago. It's on my website, and it was this interview with this guy called the Captain. And in fact, the fellow that I'm referring to, the older guy's name was Lister, and he was a part of the show. And the Captain was dying, so I did an interview with him as he was dying a few months before he died. It's actually a really good show if you're looking for any kind of reference point. So I met some really good people in that group. But separate the wheat from the chaff, and had to maybe now I could go back in, but I have no interest in that. Before we shift to coronavirus, which is going to take up the second part of the show, I did want to talk about something else that really crossed my radar yesterday, and I hadn't really thought of this before, but it's been kind of ruminating in my head that we have spent the better part of maybe 10 years now. And I say we, I'm meaning like kind of a certain slice of the collective. for the better part of 10 years, say right around 2010. Let's call it 2010. For some of you, maybe a little bit earlier, but there are a lot of people who've been going down the rabbit hole, popping red pills right and left, busting the matrix. And I do think that that's good. And I think it can also be very problematic. Let me tell you why. Or let me share my thoughts around this. When you get to a certain point of decoding reality and beginning to look at this idea that everything is a lie, which I think is, kind of the light behind the projection, that everything is a lie, including Christianity, including this idea that Jesus / Sananda / Yeshua / Emmanuel never existed, or that it's all some version of, either sun worship or Ra worship, or, some guy that lived in Greece who was thought to be an incredible wise man who was hung on a mountain somewhere not even close to Jerusalem, right? So there's a whole kind of alternative theory about that so-called individual and entity. And some of you in chat room may believe that, may embrace that. And if that's your reality, that's fine. And I'm not here to say that that's not true or true for you. I have my own version and my own so-called belief around that. But what I've noticed is this, is that when you start to pull those pillars away, when you start to tear that stuff down, and then you start to go down into the rabbit hole, and then you begin to see the horror of the world and all of its naked and gory brutality, from pedophilia to human sacrifice to cannibalism to torture to gang stalking to targeting to the manipulation of our minds and our bodies through media and medicines and foods and technology. Man, that'll knock the shit out of you. It'll knock the shit out of you. And now you don't have any kind of spiritual ballast to deal with that. You have no ground, you have no foundation, you have no divine center, because you've eliminated anything that you think is like a false belief and some fairy tale that emanates from the Fertile Crescent. And that's fine if that's what you want to do, because there is kind of a liberation around, cleansing the doors of perception, quoting Blake, to see all things as they are, infinite. But I've also seen people who do that, and it takes a toll. It takes a serious toll. And I have seen sort of the ravages of this, and it leaves people in a greater state of fear versus any kind of heightened awareness. And I think people need to really kind of understand this, because when you take the red pill and you go down the right, see, that's one of the things that Q has provided with people, right? It's like, okay, we're going to take you down the rabbit hole, and you're going to go into this dark place. But guess what? Trust the plan. Trust the plan. In some ways, it's kind of genius, because it gives people something to believe in, like things are going to be okay. Like, I can look at this shit and I know that things are going to be okay. But there are people, and I'm not here to cheerlead for Q. I'm just looking at it from kind of a psycho-emotional, cultural perspective. But there are people that don't have that. If you don't have that, and you're going down to these rabbit holes, and you're basically discarding models of reality, and you don't have a center, or you can't define something that is going to get you through a period of time, which, by the way, we are approaching. And you're in jeopardy. It's a very dangerous game to play. So I'm not saying to go run out and be a Christian. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying go run out and be anything. But if you're going to continue to uncover layer after layer after layer of deception, deceit, illusion, and all the apparent depravity that goes along with it, not only that, but how it's manifesting currently in our world, you better have a strong spiritual center. You have to. If you don't, you're going to get chewed up and you're going to be essentially turned into a nihilist. And that would be probably the best version of what could happen. And I've seen this. And I've seen this in people that I actually respect. Really respect. Is that as they go through this and do the dismantling, the uncovering, they're beginning to activate a fear program. And now I understand why people don't go down the rabbit hole, because that's ultimately kind of where it leads. More awareness doesn't always mean more security, now does it? In fact, it actually means something quite contrary. You look at the world as a very, very unsteady and unsure place. Chaotic reality where anything could happen at any time, and at times does. So you've got to be able to work on your spiritual connection while you're doing this work. And some of the best decoders I've seen have been Christians, by the way. I've seen some great Christian decoders. Like they just get in and they know the symbolism and they know everything, man. They're good at it. And they're doing it for a reason in their mind. And I would say that mostly they can handle it because of whatever kind of core or center their belief allows them to carry that burden or shoulder that burden. And again, I'm not saying you should go run out and be a Christian, but I do feel like it's really essential. Yeah, I think it was Christine. Was it Christine who? Oh, it was Cato. Cato, who left a comment on the comment section, I think about maybe 3 or 4 days ago. And she said, I'm very concerned about the times we're living in. And for the first time in my life, or maybe a long time, I started to pray. And it's like, oh, that's really interesting. In a good way, in a positive way, not interesting in a pejorative sense. And I think that that's the kind of spiritual awareness that we're going to need to cultivate. If you haven't done it already, you got to get on you got to get on that train. You got to get on that train because we're going to be going through some very challenging times. This, boys and girls, this is where the rabbit hole gets very real, very real. So let me check in with you in the chat room, and I'm going to transition to some Corona stuff, and let's see where you are. I like Thomas Sheridan a lot. He goes overboard on the cynicism, but he really is a good guy. Been in person in Houston over. Yeah, a lot of people like Thomas. I'm not gonna diss him. But let's just say Thomas has a few blind spots that he's not really willing to talk about or admit to. And I'll just leave it at that. Let's see. What else do we have? Let's call it like it is. Bernie the buffoon. Bernie. I feel sorry for the Bernie followers. The idea that everyone should be a seeker is incredibly dangerous. Without proper cooling, a CPU will. That's a great comment, Sigurd. Great comment. Let's see. What else do we have? Miranda, I wish I didn't have issues listening to preachers tell me what to believe because I'd love for my kids to have a spiritual group to go to. Haven't found anywhere I feel good about, though. People are afraid to have their reality challenged. They live their life in Plato's cave. That is true. And I do think that if your reality is challenged, you have to have some kind of, I wouldn't necessarily call it imminent truth, but you need to have some kind of relationship with your soul, right? You need to have a dialogue with your soul, because the soul is this node that works between you and this physical reality and the non-physical reality. That's essential. And we don't teach that. We don't teach it to our kids. We don't teach any of that. We do have religion, but I've always found the Christianity to be quite wanting in a number of ways, not because it's judgmental or any of that other stuff. I find it to be wanting in many. I mean, my major beef against Christianity is probably the same beef I had against Bernie Sanders. It's like, theoretically, we've been in this game now for 2,000 years. And look where the world is. And theoretically, Christianity, in all of its mighty forces, power, and glory, including the Catholic Church, with all of its resources, has enabled this version of the world to take place. And that's my beef. That is my beef. I think that it could have been better stewards and maybe not so much monetary sellouts, which is what we've seen, in my estimation. Okay, let me jump into the Corona stuff today, and I want to bring up an image that really jumped out at me, and I think is worthy of looking at and trying to spend a little time decoding, and it's going to dovetail with what I want to talk about. So this is the cover of the 2015 Economist. So we're talking 5 years ago. And of course, the Economist has left very, very cryptic clues around what they think the world will be in the year to come. Now, I think that that's true, and it's not just the world to come. I think they're dropping clues about, when I say the world to come, that historical year. But this is about the future. And as you can see, we have Barack Obama in his final year. And right to his left, which is interesting, right? The left side of Obama is Xi Jinping, who happens to be a communist, right? He's a communist plutocrat, which would appeal to the left side or the leftist version of Obama. To the right of Obama, we have Angela Merkel, who is feminine and would represent the left-hand side or the left-hand path. Now, he's surrounded by these two symbols of the left and leftism. And of course, are her fingers fucking glued together? Like, does she ever move her hands? I think she's got permanent crazy glue right here. There's some very interesting historical characters and figures. Over here we have Churchill. Over here we have Bonaparte. Some are grayscale, some are color. David Blaine is in here, if I'm not mistaken. He's also in the issue. That's David Blaine, the magician. Now, some of the symbols I think are worth really looking at. In the back, we have somebody with a mask, like an N95 mask, and it's clear they're wearing gloves. See that? It's clear they're wearing gloves. So they're trying to look at the size of the hands. I mean, they're very, very prominent. So this is about shielding oneself from contaminants, viruses, bacteria, etc. He's right over Xi Jinping, which is interesting. And then over the top or just to the right, we have a nuclear explosion, something that's cataclysmic, something seemingly apocalyptic. Now, down here, we have the turtle. And it's interesting because I found out as I was looking into this that the turtle is a symbol of the Fabian Society. What do we have here? It's a symbol of the Fabian Society. And the Fabian Society, if you know anything about the Fabian Society, they're into the long-term slow play revolution. They're not incendiary Bolsheviks. So the turtle is a symbol of the Fabian Society. And I believe there are 9, if I'm not mistaken, 9 plates that are visible on the turtle, and then 11 spikes coming off of it. You see those little spikes? But what really grabbed me about this issue was this figure right here, the Pied Piper of Hamelin. And why is the Pied Piper of Hamelin part of this assemblage? Just below the Pied Piper of Hamelin, we have the panda bear on steroids. This represents the strength of China. Then you have this little kid here who's just stuffing his face. Very well off, apparently. And then there's this very interesting image of the Earth, which looks like a football or a rugby ball, which, by the way, is not geographically correct if you really study it. But it's certainly not a globe. And then, of course, I'm going to get back to the Pied Piper. Of course, you have Alice in Wonderland. And then there's Jasper, the Cheshire Cat. And what does Alice do? She goes down the rabbit hole, right? She descends into the rabbit hole. So this is symbolic. This is symbolic of everything I've been talking about in the prior 20 minutes of the show about the descent into the rabbit hole. Spider-Man, by the way, was he received his powers because he was bitten by a spider who was radioactive. Of course, we have this specter of radioactivity in the background. He's also a web weaver. Now, these two arrows are quite interesting, and there's speculation that the numbers represent the potential for earthquakes or, Richter scale readings. And over here, it looks like the Mona Lisa, but it's not. So this represents kind of this counterfeit version, the simulacra of reality. And she's very close to Alice in Wonderland. And there's some clues here about this simulacra of reality. This version of the world that theoretically we're living in. But I want to go back to the Pied Piper of Hamelin. And of course, there's other images to check out, like the small drum kit with the Union Jack spearing it. This seems to be quite patriotic in some ways, very American-esque. But the Pied Piper of Hamelin is a figure that I've been talking about for a while now. And astrologically, you had to go all the way back. God, when was it? 1565? I have to verify and validate the date. But that's when we had Pluto in Capricorn, Saturn in Capricorn, and then it was the true node, not the south node in Capricorn. It's about as close to this time as we can find with those three aspects. And that's the time that the Pied Piper Hamelin was walking around and playing his flutes. And what was he doing? He was helping the village of Hamelin deal with their rats. They were overrun by rats. And so he played his tune and he marched the rats into what, the ocean or into the lake, a body of water. So he went to collect from the villagers of Hamlin, and they said, "Screw you, we're not going to pay you." And so he exacted revenge on them by doing the exact same thing to their children and playing a tune and their children literally disappearing. Now, if you go into this idea of Tartaria and the reset, the Pied Piper plays a pretty significant role. He's in that whole concept. And even during the 1940s, where the English government was taking kids and airlifting them out of the so-called danger zones of London when London was being bombed, that was called Operation Pied Piper, and that they were relocating kids to other parts of the world, like Australia and things like that. And what year are we in? We're in the year of the rat. So theoretically, this is a symbolic and chronological connection, both astrologically on the western side and on the eastern side with the Pied Piper. And the Pied Piper playing his tune to much to the chagrin in some ways of the rest of us. And why am I talking about this? Why do I think that this is a very important symbol on this cover? Well, I got into this a little bit the other day, and it has to do with this idea of the reset. And I find it very interesting that as this conversation around Tartaria begins to heat up, and again, there are people that might think Tartaria is a crock of shit, and that's okay, right? I'm not asking you to fall in line around things that I think are interesting, but there is something here. There's clearly something here, because people now are starting to kind of wake up in a very different sort of way. It's not just this idea that, the world is run by the pedophilic, cannibalistic Anunnaki and the Elohim and the fallen angels of heaven, and have been for a long time. I mean, that's kind of where theoretically the rabbit hole leads to, if you really go down that path. But this is another version that is interesting, because it begins to unspool this idea that there was a whole other reality here, a whole other timeline, and perhaps not just one, but multiples. And that there are these moments where these resets occur, generally when people start to wake up. And I'm not talking about the waking up of the political sense, although that could be an interesting thing. I'm talking about the waking up of the so-called reality. And again, you have to have some spiritual ballast. And one of the things that I think that's interesting about Tartaria, this whole idea, is that when I think of it and when I have discussions around it with other people, there's this interesting resonance, right? There's this very interesting resonance that speaks to a different time in the golden age in some ways, in which there was a more, again, I could be projecting into this thing, but it really feels that way, that there was this more kind of holistic interactivity with nature, structure, form, energy. And it's not quite the Garden of Eden, but it may not be that far off in some ways. So when we get into this idea of Tartaria and we deconstruct, the current reality, the current timeline, it's not taking me personally into some nihilistic place. When I do that, I go, oh, wow, this is speaking to something inside me that I remember in some ways. Like, this is the thing, right? This is the thing that we might have originated from. And in that sense, it could be the Garden of Eden, where everything was cool. And then of course we bit the apple, the tree of knowledge, whatever that is, whatever that was. But this is starting to look like the reset. I mean, we're looking around now and we're starting to see people get sick with coronavirus, right? And it is concurrent in a lot of ways with people waking up. It's like, okay, we got to hit this reset button because they're onto our game. They're understanding sort of what we do with time and these cycles of so-called reality. And one of the things that I've been following is the relationship with coronavirus and children. And there are not a lot of cases of children with so-called coronavirus. Just not. At least that's what I've been following. Now, I did bring up this idea that children are higher in copper. That's one thing. The other thing that I think might be playing a role in this is that the thymus, which has been considered to be this relic of an organ, and that after you get to a certain age stops working, which is, I think, kind of bullshit. Because I've read certain reports, again, outside alternative medical reports, that the thymus atrophies due to vaccines. And so this other organ that we have inside of us that could really help us with our immunity is shrunken and then paralyzed and making us less immune. But if you look at kids, their thymus, even with their vaccines or their vaccinations, theoretically, is still a much more effective organ in the body. It hasn't atrophied. So that's another potential reason why kids are not succumbing to this so-called virus. Copper levels, the level of activity with the thymus. Now, here's where it gets a little spooky. And again, this is something that I've run across in an idea that I would put forward, is that because of the fact that they are theoretically immune to the virus, it doesn't mean that the virus isn't in them. And now we have this idea or concept that children could be super spreaders of coronavirus and not even know it. And we may not even know it. Isn't that kind of mind blowing? I mean, wrap your head around that for a little bit, just for a moment. And I'm not necessarily saying that's the case, but I'm trying to connect some dots here. And if that is the case, and that they're immune, and it's people who are older, and I'm not sure what the cutoff, it seems to be the 40s, like around the late 30s, people seem to be more prone to whatever version of corona there is. Then what happens? We have a whole group of children without any parental supervision, without any parental guidance. We literally have a planet of orphans. Bring on the reset, right? I mean, this is where we're beginning to inch up to, right? This is what I think is taking place. And do I think it's a done deal? No, I don't. I don't think it's a done deal. And the reason why I don't think it's a done deal is because, again, this is just my hunch, my intuition. Call me crazy. If you've never seen this show before, you might think I'm already crazy anyway. But I think that they've had to move things along faster than they would like, right? They've got a timeline. Like, I've read the timeline is to get all this shit done by 2030. And apparently Trump threw a bunch of wrenches in their timeline. And I do believe that, by the way. I do believe that. And they may have used the nationalist meme or the nationalist virus in order to organize people and get behind Trump. But it's kind of gotten out of control in some ways, because that's not the world that they want. They don't want a nationalistic world, unless the nationalistic world is a part of kind of a network of nationalistic states. And then they could kind of flip their model of their so-called New World Order and make it look a certain way. But I don't really think that that's ultimately what they want to do. I think they want to abolish this idea of the nation state completely, and then have everything under one rubric. So I think that that they're behind. That's my sense. And they wanted to get to this thing and have it ready to go by 2030. That's my sense. but because there are things that have gotten in the way, they've had to kind of move this operation into present time faster. And that is a calculated risk, right? It's a really calculated risk. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens from here on out. And I don't necessarily think that coronavirus is going to be a planet killer. I don't. But I do think it's going to be incredibly disruptive, even from the aspects of the supply chain in China, which I've been talking about for a while. It'll be disruptive. It's the way it is. And yet, there are things that are in motion that I don't even think the people who think they can control reality can control. That's my sense. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out and unfolds. Oh, by the way, well, maybe I'm not going to share this now. Maybe I'll leave that for. I'll leave it. I don't want to share it now. I don't want to. I don't want to heighten your sense of uh, potential fear. I need to flesh it out a bit more. It's just something I've heard, and I don't want to. I don't want to put something out there as unsubstantiated. But I think that again, what are you going to do? You're going to take care of your immunity to the best of your ability. You're going to take care of yourself to the best of your ability. You're going to take care of your space to the best of your ability. That's it. You've got to be able to not only deal with your physical immunity, your emotional immunity, your psychic immunity. You have to deal with your spiritual immunity as well. That's the other piece. But that's why when Cato put that post up on a show from a few days back, it's like, wow, okay, here we go. This is going to be the catalyst for people to really dig deep and go deep and find that connection that is going to ultimately get you through a very kind of tricky and potentially perilous time. And to have faith in the fact that you'll have what you need without, without being so blind and dependent upon the so-called powers that be to provide those things for you, right? You just take care of your house. Take care of your house and then have faith that you're going to have this spiritual tractor beam in your life. And it's just the way it is. And the other part of this, the other component of this is that, ultimately we all perish. We all perish. We all die. And we all have to answer to that at some point in time. And it would be good in a lot of ways, to die before you die, right? I mean, that way when that moment comes, it's a seamless transition into wherever it is you're going next. And that's not always easy for people. It's not. It can be very difficult. But if you can do that, then ultimately, guess what? You're free. You're free. And maybe that's what this whole idea of being born again really allows people to do, because now they have this supreme confidence that wherever they're going after this is going to be better than this place. And and if that's the case, then God bless them. But you got to find your own version of it, though. That's my theory. That's my 2 cents. You got to find your own version. And guess what? You also have to function in the world as if the world is still continuing on a certain track. So we have to be in this world and not of it simultaneously. That's an interesting kind of version of multitasking and living in separate realities. Not always easy to do. You've got a job, you've got kids, you've got things that you love about this, you've got a passion, you've got things that you find important or intrinsic to who you are. Do you want to give those up? I don't think so. Those things keep you alive. But can you bank on those things being here for the next year, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years? Can you bank on anything in that way? Probably not. So it's a really interesting fine line that we're in, like the razor's edge. The razor's edge. You got to be nimble. And you got to dance. And you got to be able to kind of move between worlds. It's practice, kids. It's practice. All right. Let's see where we are with everybody. Let's check in with Chatlandia. Let's see what we have here. Come on now. Let's see. Joe does not look well. Joe Biden, yeah, weird. The hell, Biden. I can't even begin to tell you how surreal the whole thing is. Big Mike Obama. As of 13 minutes ago, it was still unclear should endorse either two remaining candidates. The thymus is the immune system in Chinese medicine. Thanks, Lynn. We are the wrenches going against the plan. I would agree with that, Anna. Let's see what else. Okay, there's some political talk here. Is it about Warren?
Power off.
Let's see. I'm just going back here. A lot of talk about Alabama, Gulf Shores. Let's see what else. I think you're really onto something, Robert, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Paula. If Biden goes down for Burisma, they all go down. Bonnie Willow, higher love. Yes, the thymus gland works with the spleen and bone marrow to run the immune system consciously. It supports telepathy and higher vibrations. Yeah. Let me just do a quick check. There's something going on. Let me just do a quick check here, news-wise, because there's some buzz in the chat room. And let me just let me go here. A lot of times, the useless website Yahoo has some interesting, well, at least timely news events that are breaking. Let me just see what's going on here real fast. Let's see. Oh, they got a new Batman coming out. How about that? Coronavirus vaccine is the only thing that could keep bull market alive. Veteran trader. Nicole Scherzinger defends racy Pussycat Dolls performance. We're women now. Oh, geez. Are you really? Another MK Ultra beta kitten. Let's see. Slavery. New digital tools show how important slave trade was to Liverpool's development. What else do we have here? I'm not seeing anything. Let me just go to Fox real fast. See if there's anything breaking on the election front. Kylie and Kendall Jenner show their extensive fashion collection on Instagram. Chuck Schumer, man, he went after the Supreme Court. Bad move. Oh, here's the news. Here's the news. Warren to drop out of presidential race, endorsement unknown. Yeah, just stick around till Super Tuesday, take away the Bernie votes, and keep senile Uncle Joe in the race. You did your job well. Shut down in Seattle. King County officials tell 2 million workers to stay home amid coronavirus fears. New Hampshire man attended mixer after told to stay home. Now he has coronavirus. Great. So it looks like Liz Warren's out of the race. Is anybody going to lose any sleep over that? Now it's down to Joe Biden and weekend at Bernie's. That's it. That's the best that the Democrats could do. That's the best. And Bernie is no Molotov launching Bolshevik. Trust me. He might be when he got elected, if he got elected. I think Bernie Sanders could actually be quite tyrannical if he got elected. That's my sense around him. You'd find out just what a tyrant Bernie Sanders could become. He'd become bad grandpa. Okay, one final note here before we sign off today, and it's just a conversation um, that's been going on in my head, which has manifested in other conversations. Is if you look at the current state of cinema movies, like I remember watching movies in the 70s. And one of the things that was really big as a kid in the 70s, as a male growing up in the 70s, was getting full frontal nudity. Like if you got full frontal nudity in a movie in the 70s, it was a good thing as a kid. But there were certain movies that provided very good full frontal nudity. My favorite was version of that was Slaughterhouse Five, when a topless Valerie Perrine made her entrance into my consciousness as she was transported from a hot tub scene in a porno film to Tralfamadore to become Billy Pilgrim's space bride. An interesting concept. So I began to think about this, and not just full frontal nudity, but there was also sex and lovemaking scenes in the 70s. You don't find that in movies anymore. You don't find that. You don't find full frontal nudity in movies anymore. Not that I necessarily think it's like a paragon of virtue, but I think from a cultural perspective, you don't find that. You don't find um, refined sex or refined lovemaking in movies anymore either, because that would fall under the specter of number one, look, even for a woman, right? If there's a man with a bare chest or whatever, it's the same kind of deal, but it would fall under the specter of objectification. Like you can't have that anymore. You can't have that. Oh, fine. She had to take her top off in order to sell the film. You're objectifying her, right? So that's gone. But what's what's replaced that? What have we replaced instead of having two adults who might show vestiges of or pieces of their flesh, sometimes even the entire bodies kind of entangled and wrapped together? You don't see that anymore. What do we see? We see violence. We see violence. We see torture. Torture. Movies like Saw or The Hostel or The Purge. We see dark, very dark, supernatural and occult expressions of abject horror and possession. These are the things that we see. We see violence glorified if it's connected to some kind of revenge, that is connected to some kind of morality, where people are outraged and taking their outrage out on their so-called perpetrators. This is what we see now. This is what our children see. They don't see things like this idea that people actually have bodies and they do touch and they are vulnerable, even if it manifested in at times hackneyed and exploitated ways during the 1970s. And instead, their cinematic world has been replaced by the themes and the images and the symbols that I've just mentioned. And I ask you, which one is worse? Which one shows an ability to move into the future with a greater sense of connection or a greater sense of intimacy or eros? Which one? Not the current model. What the current model promotes is greater alienation, greater disconnection from the body, greater disconnection from the emotions, greater disconnection between the two of us, meaning man and woman. And it's a sad tale. It's a sad tale. the current day of modern cinema, modern TV. It is really a kind of dystopian version of reality that's being played out 24/7. And the world that it is being promoted is a world of superheroes who really don't have any kind of intimate life, no eros, no connection, none whatsoever, unless you count Tony Stark and Pepper Potts, whatever. It's just not there. It's not there. And it's a shame. The 70s weren't perfect. They created a lot of imperfect movies and a lot of imperfect role models, to be sure. But when I look back, and this is not nostalgic thinking upon on my part, what I see in the 70s is I see a swath of humanity in all of its frailties, vulnerabilities, and even at times glory. And that's a time we'll never see again, at least not the way that it was assembled and created and projected into the frontal projection of our own consciousness. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we're just never going to see it again. And I think that as a result, people are missing out on some very, very powerful and interesting, quote unquote, human values. And where we're headed, we might be able to come to something even more real than that. But we're not there yet. And we got to get through this time, the fourth turning, the winner of America and the winner of whatever planet and realm and model of consciousness we're in right now. So if you want to feel a little bit better, go watch a film from the 70s. It'll bring you a little nostalgia, and also it'll help you wrap your head around a time where people didn't take things so seriously. You know, jokes were bad. Like, for instance, Mel Brooks could never make Blazing Saddles now. Nope. Ain't happening. That's just one example. So if things get a little too heavy and you have to bunker in for a little bit, make sure you stock up on the 70s. All right, I'm out of here. Let's see. What do we have here? Bonnie says, I'm going to be starting regular monthly healing guided meditations soon in Zoom. Good job, Bonnie. Make it happen. Let's see what else we have. Kill Your God, Kill Your TV. Marilyn Manson. Interesting character. I liked his book, by the way. I really liked On the Road to 666. Very honest. Let's see. My dad called Johnson a snake in the grass. Oh, he was terrible. Johnson was bad. Transhuman agenda. That's interesting, Ian. You know, let me do this. I wanted that's an interesting thing. I don't really want to end the show on this, but I did come across a story here. I'm just going to bring it up anyway. I really wanted to end on that little last piece, but I wanted to show you guys kind of the moment of reveal. We're starting to get to the moment of reveal now. Let me see if I can find this thing. Yeah, okay. So this is what the transhuman agenda, which is what Ian was talking about. Let me see if I can crank this thing back up. Yeah, I'm going to drop you with this. But then I have to do another ending. I don't care. So this is from the Star, which is a bit of a tabloid, actually. This is exactly what Ian was talking about. And super rich to live forever by implanting brains in human-like robots. This is so bizarre. Apparently, there's a show called Altered Carbon on Netflix, which I don't subscribe to, with Anthony Mackie, who plays the Falcon in the Avengers films of Captain America. There we go. The super rich will soon be able to live forever thanks to sophisticated scientific breakthroughs, effectively bringing about the end of death, experts believe. So they're trying to cheat death. It's like people like Bill Gates, they just want to live forever. They don't want to say goodbye to their wealth. It's like, oh, I got all this fucking money and I can live like a god here in this world. How can I live forever? Speaking to Daily Star Online, futurologist and former Labor MP, Dr. Ian Pearson, said that the next few decades will see the blurring of lines between humans and machines. He argued that such technology is already here to some degree with retina implants and microchips, but the coming years will see the technology take a massive leap forwards. Think of it as adding like an extension to the brain, similar adding to a conservatory to a house. Dr. Pearson believes that by the 2050s, we will have achieved what he calls electronic immortality. This will enable those with the means to afford it the ability to extend their minds into something resembling the cloud. Such a development could open up remarkable opportunities, including, Dr. Pearson says, telepathic communication. We already have it, man. We already have telepathic communication. These materialists. Describing what this could look like, he explained microscopic implants measuring just millimeters across could be inserted, linking up to our brains. Why would anybody want this? This would see humans able to communicate across the world by transmitting our brains via something like the cloud to another vessel, such as a cloned human body on the other side of the world. I have no interest in this world that they're talking about. Although this is incredibly sophisticated technology, is likely to be restricted to the super rich for the foreseeable future. Dr. Pearson believes that by 2060, this could become more mainstream. Really? Good luck on that. In fact, it's probably already here. And there are probably people walking around who are doing exactly what this article talks about. He added that it is most likely our brains would be transferred into Westworld-like robots. There would be no need for human cloning. We can create Westworld-style androids with rigid skeletons, he said. These would have muscle fibers grown to human flesh, and they would be 10 to 15 times stronger than human muscle. This may sound straight out of science fiction, but Dr. Pearson believes such human android could be produced as soon as 2050. You need to create high-resolution silicon masks, and this technology will be here in the next 30 years, he added. In fact, he is so confident in the development of androids, he believes we could even hire them out. If we wanted to experience life in another body for a week or so. You can even get to live as a pet cat if the android was created, he said. These are all things that Aboriginal cultures already know how to do. They already know how to do it. They could take their bodies, their subtle bodies, and move them into animal forms if they want to. This has been going on for centuries. This is nothing new under the sun, but these eggheads think that they can corner the market on it. But what they're really missing here is this thing called the spirit and the soul. This is just a soulless, utterly soulless world occupied by soulless people trying to, keep the party going past 3 a.m. And I think it's going to fail miserably. All right, I'm out of here. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being a part of the show. I'll have Steve and Chris on tomorrow. Looking forward to that. Get to hang out with them. And we're going to, I think, wrap up Kazakhstan in all of its glory. And unfettered, free, uncensored, by the way. The continuation of the tale of Kazakhstan. Sunday night, Astro Live, be around for that. I'm going to be looking at Joe Biden's chart again, just to show you what a terrible president he would be, just based on his chart alone. I mean, I could go on and on, but it's in there. Take good care of yourself. Stay healthy. Make sure that your house is in order. I'm Robert Phoenix. Use your head to discern what's real and your heart to stay open to what's possible. From Jasper and I, have a great day.